her agent and her lied and said she was British. She came up with this whole backstory about being born in England or something, and her parents had horses and shit. Like, she made up this whole fucking story.
That's awesome.
And she goes in there and she nails the audition, gets the part, and she said halfway through production, she was talking to somebody on the set in her normal voice, and Scorsese heard her and goes, "That's an amazing American accent." she goes, "Yeah, about that. I'm American. I was actually born in Georgia." And he goes, "What?" And she goes, "Yeah, I faked the whole audition." And apparently he loved it. He started rolling. And you know, and you can imagine Scorsese laughing his ass off at that.
Welcome to the Silver Screen Happy Hour. I'm Chris Wiegand, along with my brother Jerome, a screenwriter and graduate of Columbia College Chicago. You're in for a treat today. I'm really looking forward to sharing this episode with you, especially if you're an aspiring filmmaker. You'll find that this episode was much more than just a couple of brothers having drinks, talking movies, because of the two world-class filmmakers that made these films, Steven Spielberg and Martin Scorsese. The conversation was just fantastic. Before I say anything more, let me just get the film reel going of our conversation and we can jump right in. What two movies are we discussing today, Jerome? As I get my drink ready.
Today, we are comparing and contrasting. I'm very excited about today's show, by the way. I haven't been this excited. Oh, man. For those of you who don't see us, he just showed me what he's drinking today, and now I want to go get one of those out of my closet.
So I'm pouring a little bit of Jameson's.
Does that have the flame retardant cap on the top?
Oh yeah. I might as well just finish this bottle.
Sounds like he's peeing.
Yeah, that's a nice shot and a half, maybe.
Peeing with a prostate problem.
So I actually have two drinks, one for both movies. All
right, let me get back to this.
Yeah. Tell us about the movies we're talking about.
Yes, I'm very excited about this. I'm excited for different reasons. Not because I liked both films, but because of the filmmakers involved, I knew we would get awesome story structure. And they didn't disappoint.
Yeah.
So the first, we are doing The Fablemans, directed by Steven Spielberg, 2022, up for a collection of Oscars. Actually
7.
walked away empty-handed last Sunday. And we're going to match it up with Hugo, which is a Martin Scorsese film from 2011. And you'll be interested to know that it's a Scorsese film that I had not seen before. I watched it specifically for this podcast, and that's rare for me because not only is it a Scorsese film, and I'm a huge Scorsese fan, I thought I saw everything, but Hugo was up for like 9 Oscars and won like 5 of them. Like it had 11. It was up for 11 Oscars and won 5. And I keep thinking, where the fuck was I when this was happening? How did I not go see this movie?
Well, you know what's funny? I thought I saw it because I knew we owned it. And so I thought I saw it, and when you said this movie, I'm like, oh yeah, I think I saw that. So I'm watching it, I'm like, nope, I must have slept through this one. And that's not saying anything bad about the movie. It's just, we've talked about before, my work schedule's stupid. I get up at 3:30 in the morning, so usually when I watched movies with the kids when they were little, it was nap time.
Yeah, so we picked these two for a couple of reasons. One, they're both sort of like coming-of-age films, but both are, I don't want to say semi-autobiographical. For sure, The Fablemans. The Fablemans is for sure autobiographical for Spielberg. But Scorsese's Hugo isn't necessarily autobiographical to him, but he has called it one of his most personal films because of he was always that kid, a kid that was in awe of the movies, right? And very technical, very mechanical, liked to fix things. He saw a lot of himself in the main character, which is why he wanted to direct it. So 2 personal films for their filmmakers and both coming-of-age stories. So that's why we chose the 2. I was very happy that we did because I was going to watch The Fablemans anyway because it was up for the Oscars, up for Best Picture. And like I said, I couldn't believe I just snoozed right through 2011, apparently. Like, I just missed that whole year. I don't know what I was doing, how drunk I was, but I just missed Hugo. Somehow it just slipped through the cracks.
Yeah.
And while I was watching it, I was like, man, I would have loved to have seen this in the theater.
Yeah, no
Because
doubt.
it was actually in 3D when it came out.
Oh, was it? Oh,
Yeah.
I can imagine that now.
It's
yeah.
Scorsese's first 3D movie. And it won the technical awards it did win.
Yeah.
And this is what I was looking this up before I even watched the movie. I hadn't watched it, and I was trying to get a little bit of backstory, and that's when I was like kicking myself, like, how did I miss this?
Right. Did it get costume or anything? Like
It
costume
won.
design?
It
or...
won cinematography,
Okay.
sound mixing, visual effects,
Yeah.
sound editing, and art direction.
Wow.
And you sit there and you're like, first of all, how does a movie win cinematography and visual effects? Because it's one or the other. You're either doing great fucking camera work or you're using CGI for everything.
Right.
But Scorsese pulls it off. He's got great camera work, and the visuals were stunning. So, and it lost. Listen to the ones it lost. It was up for Best Picture. It was up for Best Director, Best Screenplay, Editing, Costume, and Score.
Right.
And those are the ones that lost. So, and the Fablemans. Don't have a complete list of all the Fablemans awards. I know that Spielberg was nominated. The film was nominated. Judd Hirsch was nominated for Best Supporting Actor. What's her name? Oh my God, I'm drawing. Michelle Williams was nominated for Best Actress.
I've always loved Judd Hirsch. I was so happy he was there, and he did a great job.
Yeah. Yeah. He really. Yeah. Yeah. I like Judd Hirsch in just about everything he's in.
Yeah.
So I was glad to see his little. But you know what's funny? He's nominated for Best Supporting Actor. I was telling Mom this too, because Mom loves Judd Hirsch. And I said, he's only in the movie for about 2 scenes.
Yeah, I know.
Like,
to get nominated was pretty incredible because he had such a short.
It really was. He shows up at night. He stays a day. They argue about whether or not they should even let him stay.
It probably wasn't even 10 minutes of the film, maybe.
No, I know. He stays, and then he leaves the next day.
Yeah.
He's in it for one 2-scene sort of sequence.
Yeah.
And he gets nominated for Best Supporting Actor. So let's start with the Fablemans, since we're talking about it.
Now that the shows have been introduced, let's talk about our drinks before we press on. So I already mentioned I'm drinking Jameson. In Hugo, let me pull that one up. The uncle shows up at one part in the film, drunk, and I noticed he was carrying around a flask, and so this there's very little alcohol or any drug use in either of these movies. There is marijuana use in the other one, but I found at least some kind of hard liquor in that flask. I have no idea what it was. He sounded British. This is Irish, close enough.
Well, it took place in Paris. So.
Yeah, I know. Which is funny when they all have British accents.
Yeah. Oh, I have a story on that too when we get to trivia. But anyway.
Oh, and then the other drink I have for later is a beer. It's just a Mick Ultra because I noticed that the beach day. Yeah, there you go. That's what you're drinking. On the beach day of the Fablemans.
Yes.
There was a lot of soda pop being drank by the teens, but I noticed at least one of the teens had a beer. So
yes,
I just that's the nod there.
I as well had a little dilemma with what to drink because there was, like you said, there's very little alcohol in these movies at all.
I wasn't going to smoke a joint because one of the kids did smoke a joint at one point.
And there is sort of a coming of age for like adolescents being talked about, so I didn't know what alcohol would fit with that. So I just stuck with beer. Again, also Mick Ultra. I really like the Mick Ultra. I got the tall cans, the 25 ounce, because if you're going to do anything, you might as well go big. And, okay, so the Fablemans.
Yes.
Some interesting things here. So we talked about on one of the previous podcasts about, I think we were talking about Elvis. By the way, can I just say, were we right or what? We called Elvis's structural problems.
Yep. And it didn't
on
win
the previous
one
podcast,
award.
It didn't walk away with one Oscar. Not
how many
one.
Nominations? They had a truckload.
A lot. Yeah. I don't know, but there was a lot.
Yeah.
And they didn't walk away with any.
Yeah.
And we talked about it. Whenever you have 4 writers stretched over 5 credits or whatever it was, you're going to have structural problems. The Fablemans, 2 writers. And one of them is Spielberg,
right?
Because it's his life story,
right?
So the other one is Tony Kushner, who does a lot. He does a lot of playwrights, but he adapts scripts. He's a really good adapting films, right? Mm-hmm. And some of his previous work. This is interesting. Munich, Lincoln, and West Side Story. What do all three of those have in common? They're all Spielberg movies.
Yeah.
So, Spielberg, people wonder why he uses John Williams for every movie he ever makes to do the score. When Spielberg likes somebody,
oh yeah,
right? He's
good
going to work with them
chemistry,
again.
good product, yeah.
Janusz Kaminski worked with him for many years as cinematographer. I don't know if he did this particular film, but he's the one that won cinematography for Schindler's List. He is Janusz Kaminski is a graduate of my alma mater, Columbia College Chicago, and he worked with Spielberg on many, many films. Like I said, I don't know if he did this particular one, but that's just an example that Spielberg uses the same people over and over when he likes the chemistry. So Tony Kushner was brought on. So it's just these two as writers. And like I said, the first one was an easy one because he was telling his life story, practically. I didn't know how accurate it really was. And I got to tell you, from what I've researched, practically only the names were changed.
In the Fablemans?
In the Fablemans. It's like 95% of it really happened to Spielberg.
I see, and I had no idea. So when I was watching it, I didn't do any research before, and I'm watching it, and I'm like, okay, this isn't about Spielberg because it's not his name. It's not the Spielbergs. It's the right. So I was like, okay, he just made a fictional story that's kind of like about him. Yeah, that's basically what he did. But apparently, most of it's true.
yeah, and it's funny that he chose the name Fabelmans because what is a fable?
It's a fable. Yeah,
it's a story, right?
Yeah,
so he's the Fableman, right?
Yeah.
So that's.
So you did some research in the movie. I mean, I don't know how many spoilers you want to give up, but there was a marital rift that all happened in Spielberg's family.
True story.
Yeah.
True happened.
Wow.
Definitely happened. His mother fell in love with his father's best friend.
Wow.
Left the husband and married this other friend and stayed with him forever. So it wasn't like it was just a tryst or an affair. She simply fell in love with a different guy.
Right. That was so well acted, I thought. It was the way...
Oh, it's heartbreaking.
It is. And it was, the good acting is believable, and the way it's shot and the way it's discovered.
Yes.
It was really cool. I mean, because, I don't know.
I think he tips his hand to the audience before the characters are supposed to know about it, right? Because I could tell it right away. Like some of the scenes and shot selections Spielberg uses.
They were subtle, though. I
remember thinking, what's going on there?
Yeah.
That seemed to be a little this or that.
I know,
and
I know.
And I didn't really want to think much of it because I didn't know what was going to happen, so I didn't think anything of it. And then it started to increase. And then all of a sudden, the boy, Sammy, starts noticing it in the background of the films he's shooting.
And Sammy's sort of the character that kind of plays the young Steven Spielberg.
Not kind of.
Well, right.
I mean, can you believe the actor they got to play this kid? If you look at old pictures of Spielberg from the 60s and 70s, this kid looks just like him.
You know what's funny? I read some trivia on that. He didn't know he was going to get the part. He got called back like 3 times. And when he was told he got the part, he was told he was going to be playing the young Sammy, I think is what it was called. So he thought, oh, okay, this must be like a multi-part movie where I'm going to play the young one. He thought there was going to be an old one.
Yeah, like his
so
scenes
he's
were
reading and
flashbacks or
he's
something.
reading. He's like 30 pages in and he's not even in it yet. And it's young Sammy, the young boy that played him as a little boy.
Right.
And then finally he gets to his part and he's like, oh wow, so it must be a 3-part thing where there's an adult Sammy. And nope, he had the role the rest of the way, so that kid was happy.
Yeah, and he did a great job too.
Yeah.
And it's it's a beautiful story. It's a beautiful script. It's a beautiful story. And yet it's funny because filmmakers this is only Spielberg, I think, only like his 3rd writing credit in his career.
Yeah.
Like he doesn't write a lot.
What was the other? I thought it was the second one since the 90s. What was the one in the 90s?
AI. He did one called AI.
Yeah, because that was another bit of trivia I read, that was his 2nd writing credit since AI.
Yeah, and before that, it's Poltergeist.
Yeah,
he wrote Poltergeist.
Wow.
That was the only other. So think about that. In Spielberg's illustrious career, he's written 3 fucking movies. One of them's Poltergeist. Another one's AI, and then the Fablemans.
I didn't like
right?
AI that much, but whatever.
It was disappointing.
Yeah.
It was disappointing. I agree. But
it made money.
Of course. But here's the thing, and Scorsese's very similar. Scorsese's got some writing credits. I know he was, I'm sure he's got writing credits on, I know he does on Goodfellas. But he's never the sole writer, right? He adapts films he wants to make with other writers. Gotcha. And so he doesn't have a lot of writing credits either, though. A lot of times he's just a director. I say that like that's this hack that lives down the street. Just he doesn't know what the hell he's doing. It's Scorsese. He knows pretty much what the hell he's doing. So he's just a director. But the funny thing is, he can put, like Spielberg, they put their imprint on the storytelling that they do with the camera. Like, that's what they're good at, right? They don't need writing credit because they know that, and Saving Private Ryan is a perfect example. If anyone ever reads the script for Saving Private Ryan, you would walk away going, who made this shit? Like, it's not that great. It's very mediocre. It's. I want to say the writer comes off very much like he's still in college, because it's got a lot of first-time screenwriter cliches in it. It's an okay script. But when Spielberg gets his hands on it, he turns it into Saving Private Ryan, right? The movie that we know that's a masterpiece and wins Best Director, right? So
when there's no lines, just a look on someone's face. And you know what I mean?
There's a lot that you can't put in a script that these directors bring out, right? Yeah. And even dialogue, like even if you write blasé lines of dialogue, Spielberg will pull these actors aside and say, hey, look, forget about what the script says. Like, you know this character, right? You auditioned for this role. You know what the character is. You know his background. If you want to improv a line here or there, let's go with it. You know what I mean? Very few legendary directors, I want to say Kubrick might be the only one. Every other legendary director, they just let their actors act, man. You know what I mean? Like, I'm here to tell the story with the camera, and it's a collaborative art. Only Kubrick might be the only one, like I said, that will do 78 takes because the actor won't get the line right. You know what I mean? Like, every other legendary filmmaker from Clint Eastwood on down just says, hey, when I say action, give me the damn scene. You know what I mean? Just make it happen. So that's how Spielberg can turn something like a mediocre script into Saving Private Ryan. And with the Fablemans, you know that it's his own life story. Yeah. So I got to imagine when Tony Kushner was there, they probably worked very, very closely, and Spielberg was probably over his shoulder every minute going, change that. No. That's not what my mom said. No. She would have said this instead, or she said this instead. So whatever. But two writers is the point. Yeah. Right? And one of them, obviously, it's a story about his life, so he's going to take it very, very closely and carefully. And because of it, you have a nicely tight script. Actually, what I was saying was, before I lost track, people that listen to our podcast know how much we go off on tangents. The point is, it still follows a 3-act structure. It still follows the same writing guidelines. I think that's maybe what Tony Kushner brings to it. You know what I mean? Yeah. Spielberg's got his whole life story he wants to cram into 2 hours. Yep. It's Tony Kushner's job to say, okay, what is the tangible goal? What is the spiritual goal? What's the midpoint scene? Where is the all is lost? And it still follows all these structures.
So can we talk about that for a minute with this movie? Because I was getting confused because I tried to watch it without analyzing it the first time. Okay. And I kind of went through it for analyzation purposes. And I was struggling to separate the tangible from the spiritual goal for young Sammy. I mean, it's said in the first minute or whatever of dialogue. He's a little boy and he's afraid of the movies. He's afraid. He's filled with fear to go in there. Right. And and the dad tries to talk him down and tell him what it's all about. But so fear seems to play a role in his character arc, right? The fear of people, the fear of unknown, fear of things, and he's confronted with that fear throughout the movie. Fear of bullies, fear of big time movie director at the end of the movie.
Oh man,
that
what
was
a great
that was
scene
a
there,
great
too.
scene.
You know who plays John Ford in that scene?
Yeah, I forgot his name.
David Lynch.
Yes,
Another classic filmmaker.
He is so great, man.
From what I understand,
the bark in his voice.
Turned down that part like 4 or 5 times.
Seriously?
Like Spielberg had to talk him into it. He asked him like 5 times. He kept declining. Every few weeks, he'd go back and ask him again.
Did he decline him like he did the kid in the movie?
Yeah, that's pretty much how it came out.
What did he say to him? Get the fuck out of my office.
Yeah, right. Now get the fuck out of my office. But what's great is how he ends. Did you notice the end shot, the last shot of the whole movie? Did you notice the last shot?
Where
Sammy's
like
he's walking away on the lot. But did you notice what they did with the fucking horizon?
Oh no, I didn't. I missed it.
Okay, so he said you got to go back and watch it.
Yeah, I know the part in his office where he told him to look at the art and asked him where the horizon was.
Right, look at the horizon. If it's at the top of the frame, interesting. If it's at the bottom of the frame, interesting. If it's right in the middle, boring. So as Sammy's walking off, the horizon's right in the middle, and you see Spielberg go with like this with the camera. He just jolts it up so that the horizon's at the bottom.
That. Oh my god!
You got to go back and watch that. It's a great ending, and then of course it goes black and the credits roll. And it is a great, again,
I can't believe I missed that.
Yeah, that's a great final shot of the movie. But, and again, this isn't the kind of ending when we say, spoiler alert, this isn't the kind of ending that's ruining the movie. That we're just talking about the final shot in a movie about a biography of somebody.
Yeah,
so,
we know he ends up getting into film.
You still know what happens to Spielberg, right? Like, we're not ruining anything there. He becomes a filmmaker. So go back and watch it still anyway. But you got to watch that final shot.
I'm looking at it right now.
So, did you YouTube it? The final shot?
No, actually, I rented it and I still have access to it. So I could probably get in trouble because we're playing audio here on the podcast.
We're actually watching a video on my brother's
phone. There goes.
Phone.
Yep, the camera, and it kind of shook a little bit.
So that you would notice.
Yeah,
right? That
that's
was the
so
joke.
Good. I missed that.
He did it almost like a filmmaker going, "Oh fuck, I screwed up. Let me move the camera up." He did it on purpose.
Yeah.
He did it on purpose, and it's so perfect.
Yeah, it was good.
So what do you think, though? Did you catch, at least what I felt was sort of like the character's theme, right? We always talk about in the first 5 to 10 minutes, somebody says something to the main character that ends up being sort of like the theme, right? The emotional tug of war back and forth that's going to carry throughout.
Yeah.
In the first couple of scenes of the movie, very early on when Sammy's still a boy, his father says to him, it's after he breaks the train.
Yeah.
And his father says to him, and I wrote this down because it's the second I saw it, I was like, oh, there we go. That's the theme. Sometimes I could just tell what I think is the theme right off the bat. He looks right at him and he says, you can't just love something. You have to take care of it. And if that's not a metaphor for Spielberg's love of film, right? You can't just love something. You have to take care of it. Huh. And if you watch the film with that in mind, remember we always talk about the emotional tug of war, the back and forth?
Yeah.
He loves movies the whole time. But every other scene, not every other scene, but very much scattered throughout, he's actually taking care of his craft.
Yeah.
Right? The other times, the other half of the film, he's taking care of his family.
Right.
He's losing sight of being a filmmaker, and he's worried about the turmoil that's going on in his own household.
His own household, and that also includes him going to college.
Yeah,
because going to college was all his dad's, dad's plans for his life, and he didn't, he knew he wanted to make films.
Exactly, and I wrote down that when he's not taking care of the filmmaking part, he's the dutiful son.
Yeah.
Right, and that's his emotional tug of war.
And maybe that's why it was hard for me to put my finger on it, because that's not a bad thing. You know, being a good son, trying to take care of your family. Those are good things, but you're right. I mean, it was the tug of war was obvious though.
Yeah.
So
and on that note, if taking care of the filmmaking aspect is his goal, or is his theme and his goal, then remember we talk about the midpoint scene is usually something good, and then the all is lost is usually something bad, but they're both turning points, so sometimes they're flipped.
Yeah.
And I think this time it's flipped. The midpoint scene is one of turmoil. It's right in the middle of the film is where he shows the film to his mother.
Right.
That's all the clips of her and Benny.
Yep.
basically telling his mother, I know you're screwing around on Dad. Right. And that's the turmoil part. And then the second turning point, I feel, near as we get down to the end of the second act, going into the third act, is the prom. Where the girl breaks up with him and he shows the film. Now you think, well, that's a downer too, but not really, because the film is a huge success.
Right.
Everybody in the school loved the film, and even the bully that wanted to beat the shit out of him was like, "Why did you make me look so good?" You know?
Yeah, he was wrecked. Yeah, that was a great scene because, and what that did for me too is like it showed the power, like it showed him too the power of film. If you do it right, you can have emotional reactions from people, both positive and negative, and that whole scene was awesome.
That's why, to me, that's the second turning point, and the one that jumps you into Act 3, because it's his realization of how powerful him taking care of his craft, where that can take him, right, as a filmmaker. And sure enough, you get into the third act, and he has a panic attack in his own kitchen because he doesn't want to do college anymore, just like Spielberg didn't. You know what I mean? He was like, I'm not going to learn anything reading books. I'm not going to learn anything in a classroom. I got to get into the studios. I got to, the famous story, and they allude to it a little bit in this film. But the reality is how Spielberg got started. Not a lot of people know this trivia, or maybe some do by now. He snuck onto the set. He snuck onto a studio set. I want to say it was Paramount, and he just acted like he worked there for like weeks.
That's awesome.
And nobody fucking said anything. They just, hey, grab that guy. Hey, can you move that grip over there? He just walked on the set and acted like he worked there. And anytime somebody needed a camera moved or a dolly set up, he jumped in and helped out and set it up. And they just thought he worked there.
How many times have you thought about doing that?
You can't do that shit nowadays.
When you first moved out there. Of
course, when anybody reads that story, they're like, yeah, I'm going to do that. Unfortunately, the security at Warner Brothers, for instance, like today, you can't do that shit. It's like, fuck, you can't even get near that place without fucking badges and security cards and everything. But back in the 60s, 50s actually, late 50s, early 60s, you could pull that shit off. But anyway, so, and then he got noticed. He started working on TV shows on those sets. And that's when he got noticed by Sid Sheinberg, and they let him direct an episode of TV. That's how it all started.
Wow.
So, and they allude to it a little bit because John Ford gives him that little, if you could call it a pep talk. And then he walks out of there, and it's like a light went off, right? That's the whole climax of the movie. And he's walking down the set, right? And it's sort of, that's what I mean by when they say they allude to it. He's on the set. So that's what I thought was a beautiful job by screenwriter Tony Kushner, was he still managed to keep those points. And it's hard to do when you're doing a biography. We talked about this when we did Walk the Line and Elvis. When you're doing a life story on somebody, particularly obviously a famous person, you still have to find that through. We all live our lives in a 3-act structure. We just don't know it yet. You know what I mean? We all have a first turning point, a midpoint scene, and a second turning point. We just don't know when they are until we're on our deathbed. Then we could say, yes, that was the midpoint scene of my life, wasn't it?
I'm hoping this is my midpoint scene. That's being optimistic.
I think I'm already at all is lost.
Oh, shit.
I've got the third act to go, and I'm done. On that note, for anyone that's listening, this is for you. There we go. Yeah, there's my all is lost transition period there. So yeah, I wrote that note down about how he's distraught at the prom because the girl breaks up with him and he feels down, but he plays this movie in front of everybody and everybody loves it, and it's a huge, huge success. That's where I get that he reaches his spiritual goal if he leaves school. Because he doesn't just love film, he has to take care of it. And that was the theme that his father told him when he was a child, and he was finally seeing it into fruition.
That scene that where he, in the midpoint scene where he talks to he shows his mom the film clips of
her and Benny.
Of her and Benny, just these moments that he was able to pick up that just showed their intimacy on the screen.
Absolutely.
And but that, you could say that is also, so if fear is the thing he has to overcome, the fact that he did that That was kind of the completion of so-called of him attaining one of those goals. He faced the fear. He showed her.
Well, I'm going to say that your fear theme runs concurrently with the theme that I was talking about. If you love something, you have to take care of it. And you're going to find when we talk about Hugo, there's two themes going on there too.
Yeah.
That I caught. Two interesting little themes that are going on simultaneously. I agree with your fear one because absolutely. And if you think about even how it ends.
Yeah.
Like you said, the fear of him having to go into John Ford's
I
office.
almost heard his knees knocking.
And
it was
get
like
the shit kicked out of him verbally by an old man. It's I mean, it's just awesome. I mean, and like you said, like there's also a lot with the school, and I mean, how much anti-Semitic abuse that he had taken in real life too. Spielberg talked about how being bullied for being Jewish when you're growing up was just a common occurrence. You know what I mean? And I can't.
It makes me
imagine.
angry too because a lot of anti-Semitism, unfortunately, came out of. Well, I guess you could just say some toxic Christianity, where it was taught that it was the Jews killed Jesus. Well,
right.
Theologically, it was our sin that killed him. So it always upset me when I heard that people would say that, and then they said that in the movie. I'm like, oh man, yeah. So,
well, a little side bit again because we like to go off on tangents. I once dated a girl.
Uh-oh.
This is like shit. This had to have been like 20 years ago, and I remember it was around 2001 or maybe 2002. When did Passion of the Christ come out? Was that 01? 01 or 02,
Gosh, I don't
somewhere
remember.
in there? Maybe even 03, somewhere around there. Anyway, I was dating a girl, and her family was not Catholics, but they were, Christians.
04.
04, okay. So, yeah, that sounds about right. So I was dating this girl. Her family were very devout Christians, not Catholics, but Christians. Mm-hmm. And Passion of the Christ come out. And I remember saying, I happened to go over to their house, and we were talking about the movie. They hadn't seen it yet. And I said, yeah, it's getting a lot of criticism from some of the people in Hollywood, because, Hollywood has a very large Jewish community. And, there's a lot of criticism on the film. And the mom, the girl I was dating, her mom goes, why? And I go, well, because in the film it depicts, that the Jewish leaders are the ones that condemn Jesus to death. And she goes, well, they did. I was just like, okay, so what's for dinner? You know what I mean? Like, I wasn't even gonna go into the argument. Or discussion. It's not really an argument. I was just like, okay, so what are we having for dinner?
And that's what I mean about the way people interpret history in the scriptures. It's like, oh my gosh, because it is true. That is what happened, but you could, standing back looking at the story, you could say religion. It was religion that killed him, in
Jesus
general.
was Jewish after all.
Because I know some Pharisees that aren't Jewish, if you know what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? There's some religious Pharisees in the world today that aren't Jewish, so yeah. Anyway.
All right, so anything else you want to add on the Fablemans?
No, it's a great film, so I think we should jump ahead to Hugo.
Okay, so Hugo, set 1931 Paris.
Yeah.
And again, as we talked about earlier, some amazing shots. And the fact that a film can win, not just be nominated, but win cinematography and visual effects. I want to say Titanic did it too in 98,
Quite
early
possible,
98.
I don't remember.
But very few films can pull that off.
Mm-hmm.
To where, because like I said, it's either one or the other. You know what I mean? You either have amazing cinematography because you're doing all this crazy shit with the camera, or you're doing like Phantom Menace style and everything's with a green screen and it's CGI, right? So it's amazing that you could do both, and Hugo pulls it off. So again, one writer,
Yeah.
and it's not even Scorsese; it's John Logan. And I want to say you should know who John Logan. I think John Logan did Gladiator, if I'm not mistaken. You might have to look that up. But it was based off a book. He adapted a book. The book was called The Invention of Hugo Cabret. And so again, when you get one writer, you can deal with.
Yeah, John Logan was. He wrote. There was two people that wrote in that, but John Logan wrote the screenplay for Gladiator.
Yeah. Okay.
Yep.
So, and he's probably got a lot of other great credits too, because Scorsese ain't gonna work with crap. So.
Oh my gosh! Yeah, The Aviator, Skyfall, Rango, Sweeney Todd.
Exactly.
I mean, the list goes on.
Yep. List
Holy
goes
crap.
on. And that's the funny thing about Hollywood. For all you writers out there who want to make it in Hollywood, just pick a random person and go look at their writing credits. And you'll see that they have a huge body of work that you might not even realize. Like, you know what I mean? And a lot of times they're hired to adapt something.
Right.
It's one thing to be an original screenwriter and you get to direct your own shit. And, like your Quentin Tarantino or something. I mean, that's rare to be able to make it like that. A lot of guys are just hired writers, right? They're just hired. They're hired by directors to adapt books or adapt stories, and they have a great structure sense. They have the structure that we talk about in these podcasts. These guys know it like the back of their hand. So that's why they keep getting jobs. That's why the Spielbergs and the Scorseses out there, when they read a book that they like, you know what I mean? Scorsese probably read this book, The Invention of Hugo Cabret, totally identified with the kid, and was like, I really want to make this into a film. This might be a good point to edit.
Let me crack my beer.
Okay. Ooh.
Yeah.
I love that cracking noise. Oh. Now it sounds like you're peeing into foam.
Kind of looks like it too.
I like how you poured that right into the same glass you were drinking the Jamesons out of.
Gives it a little extra flavor.
Yeah, I bet. Anyway, so where was I?
Where were we?
So I was talking about, I can imagine Scorsese reading the book, The Invention of Hugo Cabret, and thinking to himself, I want to make this into a film. I need to find a screenwriter, right? So it's, he might have people he always uses. I know that he had a different writer adapted The Departed, but who knows? He may have called a bunch of guys, and they might have been like, I'm already onto something. I'm doing a film for Spielberg, or I'm doing a film for Clint Eastwood, or whatever.
Right.
And he was like, all right, well, let me find another one. You know what I mean? Like, eventually he gets to John Logan. You know what I mean? Like, I don't know how it worked out. Right. But these guys, that's my point to anybody that's listening. I don't want anyone to think that you're just going to jump into Hollywood and be Tarantino. It just doesn't work out that way. It's just that's so rare. It's rare to make it at all. But if you're going to make it, generally you're a writer for hire. Yeah. You know what I mean? You're a guy that just adapts scripts, or, a very, gifted person who can come along and just be somebody that people turn to write,
Yep.
And I think that there's a nice and sorely needed influx of women writers. There's so many great female screenwriters out there now, and it just wasn't the thing for a longest time in Hollywood. It was so stereotypical, male-driven, and like I said, you think it's writer for hire now. Shit, back in the 50s, there might have been 5 dudes that wrote every movie. Yeah, right. You know what I mean? So, but nowadays there's so much diversity, and it's so great when you see, movies like Parasite win Best Picture. You know what I mean? Like you just get an idea that there's so much more out there, so many more points of view.
Wasn't Promising Young Woman a female writer too?
Yes, right.
I know it was a writer-director. Did she write and direct it?
Yep.
Okay, yeah.
So, and again, sorely needed, because we need some new flavor in Hollywood. There's so much of the same old shit that it's nice to have new perspective. So, I still think that there are barriers in Hollywood, that old school, the old white man is still running a lot of the studios, right? So it's not a free-for-all yet. It's getting there. It's far better than it used to be. Yeah. But,
well, especially now with the advent of the streaming services and them entering the picture. Yes. It's kind of wide open now. I mean, if you got any writing chops or directing chops, there's no reason you don't get in somewhere.
Yeah, and like I said, you might work as, pardon the term, you might work as a hack for a long time. There might be 10, 15 years where you're just hired to rewrite other people's shit.
Yeah.
But it's work, man. You're getting yourself out there. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I mean, a lot of these guys that are hired to adapt these books do have original screenplays. If you were to look up John Logan right now, I know you had him on IMDb, but it'll say written by are the ones that are his original screenplays.
Ah.
And then if it says screenplay by, those are the ones he adapted. But I bet you there's a healthy dose of both.
Yeah, interesting.
You know what I mean? So, that's that. But anyway,
so Hugo.
Okay. Another one that I really, really liked. And again, I'm kicking myself because I don't know how the hell this one slipped through the cracks 12 years ago. I don't know how I missed it. Especially since it's a Scorsese film. I feel so ashamed. Like I've always prided myself on being a Scorsese guy, and how I just missed this one. I have no clue and no idea whatsoever. But again, for anyone that doesn't know, we usually start these shows with go watch the trailer. But it's actually a film about one of the first real filmmakers ever. George Méliès, who is kind of forgotten because he has, if you IMDb him, he's got over 500 directing credits.
Wow.
He was one of the first that when film became a medium, right? Like a form of entertainment. He was one of the first to. Oh, by the way, did you notice the train link between both movies?
Yeah.
Right. So the Fabelmans starts with he's watching The Greatest Show on Earth,
right,
the movie.
Yep.
And the train crash is what freaks him out, and then he wants to recreate it with his own train set and film the train crash. And then in Hugo, it's shot in a train station, and George Méliès works at the train station, and one of his first real successes was shooting the train, that short film of the train coming towards the audience.
Yeah.
And they say in real life that really happened, where audience members were getting up and jumping out of their seat. They thought the train was going to hit them, like that, because film was so new then. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
We sit here, we go to a movie, and we watch Avatar in the theater on the IMAX screen, and we don't bat an eye.
We don't even get motion sickness.
Right. And crowds were going in to watch this train come at them, and they were moving out of their seats because they thought the train was going to fucking hit them.
Yeah.
So, but he was one of the first. He was the first to create a studio and shoot films in the studio. And he was the first to do a lot of things. He tried to get a camera from... I don't know, this camera company that was building cameras. They didn't want to just give him one. So he had to build his own. So he built a camera. And it made me think of that documentary, Light and Magic,
right,
where John Dykstra and those guys had to build their own cameras to shoot Star Wars because we didn't have the technology, right? They didn't have the technology to make Star Wars the way Lucas wanted. They had to build their own cameras. It made me think of that all these innovators, all these auteurs, the beginning of film, the birth of film, had to make their own shit and really create it from the ground up. He was one of the first, if not the first. And he made over 500 films, and they all were lost. Like, they were all burned. And, like, the heartbreak that he has, right? Like, it's so devastating. And here's where we get into the 3-act structure of the tangible and spiritual goals. I'm going to tell you what I think, and then you tell me what you think, okay?
Yeah.
There is a scene near the beginning where George Méliès, who at this time is just a broken down, old, angry shopkeeper, right? Where Hugo had broken his mouse, right? He knocked it off the table onto the floor and it broke.
Yeah.
And he hands it to him and he says, "Fix it." And he does, right? But that to me, what?
I just looked up George Méliès.
Yeah, Méliès.
Méliès.
Mm-hmm. It's actually Georges. He has an S on the end. It's Georges. He's French. Georges Méliès.
So it says he directed 532.
Yeah.
But it says there's 960 titles connected to him.
Yeah.
Holy shit.
Yes, that's what I'm saying. That's why this guy wanted to kill himself when it was like.
And he was born during the Civil. When did the Civil War happen? Because he was born in 1861, and he died in 1938. Isn't that crazy?
So 1938. Now think about this. The Oscars started in 1927.
Yeah.
So he had already missed his, right? Because he had already, by that time he was already, remember, this takes place in 1931, this film.
Yeah.
So he died 7 years after the events of this movie took place.
I'm glad it, like, he was recognized before he died.
That it ended well for him. Yeah, so much. And that's the part that really gives you chills. Like, so again, we go into the spiritual and tangible goals, right?
Yep.
So, so he tells Hugo fix it, and that to me I think is a theme that runs throughout the whole film. That's theme number one.
Okay.
That it runs through the whole film.
Totally buying that. Yeah.
And his tangible goal, what is it he wants to fix more than anything?
The robot.
The robot.
Yeah.
And halfway through the film, if it's not the fucking right at the midpoint scene, he fixes the fucking robot. So, I mean, tell me these guys don't follow script structure, right? Right at the midpoint scene, he fixes the robot, and then he finally gets what he thinks is a message from his dad.
Yeah.
And it really, it leads him on a whole new path, right? Because the next scene, they go to George Malay's house to say, hey, look, with the robot that we fixed, drew this picture with your name on it. And they drop the box, and all the drawings come out, right? And that is, again, what you might consider... It was a happy moment for Hugo, right? Because he fixed the robot. So that was his tangible.
Right.
That was his false victory.
Right.
That was his false victory. But he realized, I mean, it immediately goes to shit in the next scene when they drop the box and the old man comes in. And what a heartbreaking scene. He's not just mad. He sits down on the bed, looks at Hugo and says, "You're just cruel." Like, to a child. He says that to a child. If I looked Vivi in the face and called her cruel, she'd probably start crying. Like what the worst thing you can say to a kid, right? Like, you know he's mad, but you don't know why yet, right? So when you're watching it, you don't know why he's so distraught. He's picking up everything and he's trying to tear the pictures, and that's when he sits down and delivers probably the most gut-wrenching line I've ever seen an adult give a kid in a movie. And then after that, it's all about how do we fix it, right? Again, there's that theme of fixing. How do we fix this for the old man?
Yeah.
And the one guy, what's his name? The guy that comes up, René Tabard, comes up to them in the library and says, "I know everything about this guy. I've been researching him forever." And they're like, "Well, guess what? He lives in this fucking town," right?
Right. Yeah, right.
So they go to introduce him to him, and it's just a great sort of like build-up to the second turning point, whereas, in my opinion, it's the second turning point because it leads you to the third act. They go to show the wife the film behind his back. They don't want him to know. He had just laid down for his nap, and they go to show because they think he's going to freak out again.
Yeah.
He finds the film, one film that wasn't burned. And if it's not the best one, right? It's the one about the rocket getting shot into the moon's eye.
Right.
And that's become almost a staple of early filmmaking in Hollywood.
Yeah.
Is that film. And they show it, and everybody is excited, and then he's standing there, right? He came in and saw that they were playing, and he wasn't pissed. In fact, he was emotional and happy that something of his had been saved.
Right.
That, and then it goes into a montage, and then, what had become of his life and everything. And then there's this big sort of chase scene where Hugo has to go get the robot, right? He's like, not only do we find this film, guess what else I got for you, old man? So he goes to get the robot, and of course then Sacha Baron Cohen's part as the station inspector.
Borat.
Borat's in the film, but his name is Gustav, and he's the station inspector.
Yeah.
And stops him, throws him in jail, and there's like this whole, oh no, what are they gonna do? And of course Georgia saves the day at the end.
Yeah.
And it's just a great story, but again, it's perfect because the spiritual goal was, he was told early on by George Méliès in the first, 10 minutes of the film, fix it.
Yeah.
And what is it that he ultimately fixed?
He
George's legacy.
Right.
And again, we always talk about in great screenwriting, your spiritual goal is something you had no idea you were going to do, right? No idea that that's what you were supposed to do. You know what you wanted to do, and you get that halfway through.
Yeah.
But the end of the film is always something you didn't expect. And halfway through the film, all he really wanted was to fix that damn robot. But by the end of the film, he realizes he fixed more than a robot.
Yeah.
He fixed the legacy of the greatest early filmmaker that ever lived.
Yeah.
Very touching. Great Scorsese film. So I have another theme that I felt ran concurrently.
What was that?
The aspect of trying to combat loneliness with companionship. You see it throughout the film, right?
What do you mean? What do you mean by that?
So the film's littered with lonely people.
Yeah,
and they're trying to find companionship to fill the gaps in their life.
Yeah. Okay.
Right.
Yep.
So, and if you look at that theme, sort of connected to George Méliès's sort of something's missing out of my life because it was taken away from me. Even though he's married, he's happily married, but the aspect of film love, much like the Fablemans, the film love is missing because he lost it all. So he's a heartbroken man, and he's looking forward to get that back, right?
Yeah.
Well, he's actually not looking to get it back. He thinks it's gone forever,
right?
Until it comes back into his life. But think about all the other characters in the film. The big guy, that really big guy
the
that
guy
works.
from Harry Potter,
yeah, that constantly tries
he's the uncle, Harry's uncle or whatever.
And he's always trying to do something nice for the lady with the dog.
Yeah.
And the dog always growls at him, right?
Yeah.
But he's obviously trying.
And then he finally buys a dog.
Yeah.
Which is another companion for the dog.
Was it a companion for the dog? I even wrote that on my notes. I wrote, big guy always hitting on lady with dog. And then underneath I put, even the fucking dog. Even the dog was looking for companionship. Because he gets the dog a dog at the end. Gustav, the station inspector, he's always hitting on the girl with the flower girl.
From the
you know
Kid.
What I mean?
She's from The Kid, right? The movie The Kid.
Actually, I was thinking, I believe she's in a very underrated and very little seen Ryan Gosling film called Lars and the Real Girl.
Oh, yeah. Yeah,
Yeah.
I think she's in that too.
She's the sister, right? She's his sister.
Yeah, but she was Bruce Willis's assistant in The Kid, right? Personal assistant.
Yes,
you don't remember?
I think you're right.
Yeah.
I think you're right. So there's that, and then of course Hugo, right? Who doesn't think. I mean, since the loss of his father, and his uncle's been missing until they find out his uncle's been dead for months already, right? Like, what a weird scene that is. What a weird scene that is, though, because Gustav is like, who the fuck's been running these clocks for the last 3 months?
And he was like chuckling about it when he was telling everyone he's dead.
Yeah, he's like, hey, they found him 3 months ago. Drunk as usual, and somebody's been running the clocks. Like, nobody knows. Nobody knows who's been running the clocks.
Right.
And meanwhile, Hugo is overhearing this, and he's got this weird mixture of I'm distraught that my uncle's dead or has been dead, but at the same time, holy shit, they're onto me. Like, what a weird mixture of emotions all coming at once.
Yeah.
But anyway, but even Hugo, because of the loss of his father and then uncle, he also has been looking for companionship, and he strikes up that friendship with Isabel relatively easily, right?
Yeah.
So I thought that there was sort of that mix there, that the two themes going on at the same time, but they were connected.
Yeah.
About the companionship, or at least each character had something missing in their life that they were looking to fill.
Yeah. Well, I thought it was kind of heartwarming, too, when that scene where Hugo was put in jail or whatever, or he was captured, and what's his name? Ben Kingsley.
George Méliès.
George, yeah. When he shows up and claims him as his own. Basically.
That's what I meant when I said he comes and saves the day at the end. Yeah.
But the way he did it and the words he used, I don't remember the exact words, but he basically claimed him as his own, kind of restoring a father figure in his life. He
said, "This child is mine."
Yeah. It was good. Yeah. It was good stuff.
Yeah. Very, very great. God, again, I was so happy to watch both of these films, and again. They didn't disappoint. You got to know when you see Spielberg and Scorsese,
right?
That even if it's a shitty script, they're going to make it a great script. Now, these were both really good screenplays because again, one writer. One writer on this one, and Fablemans had two, but I don't count Spielberg because it was his life story, so that doesn't count.
Right.
It was really Tony Kushner structuring Spielberg's life story.
Yep.
And that's always a dead giveaway, folks. Every time you look at movie credits, if you see 7 people were credited for writing a script, probably shit.
Just skip
probably Garbage. It's probably garbage, right? Probably a bunch of dog shit right there.
Wait till it's streaming on Netflix.
Yeah, for free. But when you see one writer, and a lot of times you'll see this if it's, like I said, I've used Tarantino as an example a couple times. If it's a writer-director who directs all their own shit, so that's usually a dead giveaway too, because you know that they're directing their own script. But that could be a good thing or a bad thing.
Yeah.
If you don't like that particular filmmaker's kinds of films, then you know that there isn't. Film is collaborative. Everybody has a job. Everybody has a role. But when your director and writer are the same person, a lot of times it cuts the collaboration down a little bit, because it's one person doing all the thinking, right? And when you see a script where the credits say written, produced, and directed by, then you know, well, shit, this guy threw the money in for it too. That means it's really their film.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So, again, the collaborative effort is cut down just a little bit more. Now, the actors and actresses and editors and cinematographers, so they'll still all have their parts to play.
Yeah.
But when you see Scorsese and you see a different writer wrote the script, you're getting an idea of, okay, this is collaboration. This is good. We're going to see a really good screenwriter adapt a really good book, and now we're going to see Scorsese's twist on it. And the fact that it was, again, his first 3D film, and a film that most people were like, this is unlike anything Scorsese's done before. He's known for Mean Streets and Goodfellas.
Right,
You know, for him to do Hugo, which is a coming-of-age story about a kid,
Right.
It seemed out of left field at the time, I could imagine. I don't remember, because apparently I was drunk.
I was asleep.
I was asleep, but somehow, yeah, you were asleep. I was drunk. Somehow, it just slipped right through my fingers. But I can imagine at the time, critics were like, whoa, this is unlike him.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
This is interesting. It's not the kind of film he does.
Yep.
And he knocked it out of the park.
Yep.
Hence all the Oscar nominations, including the Oscars that they won.
So I wanted to get to 6 Degrees. I was going to throw at you the 2 uncles from from both films, the drunk uncle in Hugo and the what's his name, Hirsch in
Judd Hirsch.
Judd Hirsch in Fablemans. But
what
I
was
thought
his name? What was his name too? It was Uncle something.
Yeah, but I thought it would be too easy.
Ray Winstone was Uncle Claude in Hugo.
Yeah.
And Judd Hirsch was Uncle Boris. He was Uncle Boris in the Fabelmans. So there was 2 uncles. But as you say, there are two big of names.
Yeah, they're really big. So I went with a more difficult, but I thought was more difficult. We'll see. Was the boy that played younger Sammy in the Fablemans? His name's what? Mateo Zoran. That's a unique name. Yes. And then Asa Butterfield.
Asa Butterfield
and Hugo,
who played Hugo.
Yeah.
Hugo in Hugo.
Yes. So I thought because the first kid, the younger Sammy, that was his first feature film, and he was in a short film. So I was like, you're gonna have to, if you do this, you're gonna have to use Hugo.
So for those that aren't familiar with this game, it's very similar to 6 Degrees of Kevin Bacon, but we use it for any actor. We try to connect any two, and usually since we talk about 2 films, we pick an actor from each one. But we often say we can't use those films to make it even harder.
Right.
We have to use other films. But he's going to allow me to use the Fablemans today, since Mateo Zoran has only been in the Fablemans as a feature-length film. Because that's actually the rule. A feature-length film that's been in...
on the big screen.
That's been on the big screen. So we don't use television shows. We don't use directors. It's actors only.
Yeah.
Dropping my pen here. But you'd be surprised. And again, for anyone, this isn't a stump Jerome thing. We started marketing it as that, but it's not really that. We really are forever in a search if there are 2 people that cannot be connected within 6 degrees. We really want to know.
Right.
And as yet, we haven't found that. We have found that everybody, and I mean everybody, from Charlie Chaplin to Carrot Top, any 2 people can be connected within 6 degrees. That's our argument. And we have yet to find any 2 that cannot. This one's actually easier than you thought. Of course, we know Mateo Zorin played the young Sammy in the Fablemans.
Yes.
Seth Rogen was also in the Fablemans.
Yep.
If you laughed your gut off at Seth Rogen in the film that Neighbors, where he lives next door to Zac Efron and his wife is Rose Byrne. Anyway, there's a sequel called Neighbors 2. And in that film is Chloe Grace Moretz, who, of course, is Isabel and Hugo.
Wow. That was easy.
So that's only 3 connections. The Fablemans, Neighbors 2, and Hugo will connect Mateo Zorin to Asa Butterfield. And it only took 3 this time.
Yeah.
And here's the asterisk we always put at the end of these things. It might even be able to be less. Who
Right,
knows?
yeah.
I'm not claiming to be the know-it-all. Our point isn't to try to find how few connections we can make. It's just that there is a connection.
Yeah. So for those of you listening, if you can do it in less than 3, let us know.
Yeah, but the rule is we have to get it at least less than 6. It's got to be 6 or less.
6 or less.
6 degrees is the game, and we really want to know, are there 2 people out there that can't be connected? Now, I know what you're probably going to say. I'm sure that there's some background actor from a 1927 film in America that can't be connected to a background actor in some, I don't know, Korean film from 10 years ago. Maybe, but we haven't been proven otherwise yet.
I tell you what, I'm gonna
give me that opportunity, and I'll try to find it.
We should have an episode where I just pick 2 actors that aren't even in the movie we're discussing, because now I want to give you Georges Méliès and connect him to somebody. We'll connect him to Carrot Top, maybe.
Right, because he was an actor too. He appeared in a lot of his own films.
Yeah.
But now you're just fucking with me, man, because that's like 1910 and
you're
shit.
Going deep.
I'm gonna need IMDb for this one.
Oh wow.
So yeah, another good show.
Yeah.
Any other thoughts on these films?
No, this is a fun gig. I enjoy. I wish we were making millions of dollars doing this, but
that'd be great.
It's a good night drinking.
If anyone wants
talking
to pay
movies.
If anyone wants to pay us $1 million, we'll do it. But give us a nice studio. We'll do this shit all the time.
Yeah. Well, if I get better at this, we can do the Patreon and whatever, get some sponsors. But we're just doing this for kicks and giggles.
I particularly was looking forward to this one because of Scorsese and Spielberg.
Yeah.
Sometimes, if you've listened to our podcast, very few times we have a dud. I think only once we've had a dud so far. That really awful Mel Gibson movie that we saw.
Well, here's the thing. You can call it a dud, but it made for entertaining listening, I think, because we both shit all over that movie.
And that's the funny thing is, well, actually, you could argue that we didn't give a lot of love to Elvis either, the script.
Yeah.
Now, we both loved the movie.
Yeah.
But the script was littered with problems.
Yeah.
And anyone listening doesn't know what we're talking about, go back and listen to the Walk the Line and the Elvis podcast.
Yeah.
So that's another example of, sometimes we'll pick a film. It's not necessarily because the script is so great. Sometimes it's because the script has problems.
Yeah.
And we're using it as a tool, as like a learning tool. Part of this podcast, this all started because we like to sit around, drink, and talk movies. But then we realized, there's people that are writers that might be interested in some of this shit that we talk about writing structure. So we're not licensed teachers, but we like to try. Again, we've stopped talking about what we're going to do next week because sometimes the movies change and sometimes the date changes. So,
yeah, exactly.
I can say that we're looking forward to picking 2 new films. I will push this little teaser that Everything Everywhere All at Once just won 7 Oscars, including screenplay.
It would be a crime if we didn't cover it.
You can bet we're going to do Everything Everywhere All at Once eventually. Might be the next podcast. It might not, but you can bet we're going to get around to it because who doesn't want to mess around with the multiverse and see how can you possibly follow a coherent 3-act structure with the multiverses going on all at the same time.
So I'm actually looking forward to doing that with you just so I can get your help. I struggled when I saw that movie and I was just like, what the hell is going on?
I already have a lot of thoughts, but we'll save it for that podcast when we do it. But yeah, it's you can bet that that's going to be on the list. But this is part of the fun. We like, and that's why a lot of times Oscar season will pique our interest.
Yeah.
For anyone listening, we're in Oscar season at the time of this recording. We had just finished the Oscars. It was Sunday night. It was a few days ago, and that's a lot of times where we pull our movies from, or at least the current movie.
Right.
And then we try to pair it with something from the past. So that's, this is a fun time. This is where we get to pick a lot of our movies. So
Yep.
Everything Everywhere All at Once, that's a hell of a sweep.
Yeah,
You win 7, and it's
Yeah.
not just 7 technical awards, folks. This was 7 of the big ones.
Oh, yeah.
This was Best Picture, Best Director. 3 of the 4 acting categories
Right.
all went to this movie. And then you have the screenplay and, what was it, the editing? I mean,
I don't even remember what the other ones were.
You can't get any bigger than that. I think I posted on Facebook. I said, that's a better haul than Silence of the Lambs had. Silence of the Lambs may have had the top 5,
Yeah.
right? Picture, director, actor, actress, screenplay. But this one had 7.
Yeah.
7, and it's 3 acting awards, not just 2. So
Yeah, that's crazy.
I don't know, man. I think it's a bigger haul than Silence of the Lambs. Of course, nothing will ever top Silence of the Lambs in my heart. As one of my you know what? One day, one podcast, we are going to do Silence of the Lambs. I don't know what I could possibly pair it with because everything else would be insignificant.
I guess it'd probably have to be some kind of serial killer type.
Yeah, it'd have to be something.
Thriller.
It'd have to be a theme-driven one.
Yeah.
But yeah, for those of you again who have heard multiple podcasts, you know my love for Silence of the Lambs. It's such a great film. But yeah, so look forward to that. All right, anything to close out? Let's crack open another one, but we'll do it off the air.
Yeah, go ahead and reach out to us on Instagram, Silver Screen Happy Hour. Love to hear your feedback, comments, yeah, all that stuff. So that's probably the easiest way. It's the account I check the most. We got Facebook too, but yeah, I'll get all of it through there.
Oh, so forgot real quick. Do I have time for a trivia?
Yeah, go for it.
Okay, so one last thing. Some of you may have already known this, and just recently I noticed it was going viral as a short on the internet, kind of reviving this. But James Corden was doing an interview with Chloe Grace Moretz and asked her, isn't it true that you once faked being British? She was born in Georgia, by the way. She's American. He goes, didn't you once fake being British to get a movie part? And she goes, yes. She goes, it was Hugo. And at the time, she was obviously a kid.
Yeah.
And Scorsese was only interviewing British actors and actresses at this point.
Oh, that's hilarious.
So when you said it's odd, it takes place in Paris, but it's filled with all British people, he was only interviewing British people. That's the only people he was auditioning.
That's hilarious.
Her agent and her lied and said she was British. She came up with this whole backstory about being born in England or something, and her parents had horses and shit. Like, she made up this whole fucking story.
That's awesome.
And she goes in there and she nails the audition, gets the part. And she said halfway through production, she was talking to somebody on the set in her normal voice, and Scorsese heard her and goes, that's an amazing American accent. And she goes, yeah, about that. I'm American. I was actually born in Georgia. And he goes, what? And she goes, yeah, I faked the whole audition. And apparently he loved it. He started rolling. And you can imagine Scorsese laughing his ass off at that.
A director gets duped by a good actor.
By a young, what was she, 11?
Yeah, I know.
Something like 11-year-old actress
That's
just totally
amazing.
duped. Martin Scorsese, one of the finest directors of all time. It's so great. It's such a great story. So that was the little trivia I had to throw in there.
Yeah, good stuff. And that's where we yell cut and fade to black on this episode of the Silver Screen Happy Hour. We're so glad you listened in. You can email us at silverscreenhappyhour@gmail.com. You can find us on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter. We'd love to hear from you, and stay tuned. We got another couple great episodes in the can that are being processed right now. You're not going to want to miss them, so be watching for the feed. And if you're not already, follow us on whatever app you're using to listen to the audio, and you'll be sure to be notified the next time we drop one. So get out there and support your local movie theater, and go watch some movies. For my brother Jerome, I'm Chris Wiegand. Until next time.